resilient or robust. You can bounce back, but anti-fragile is kind of bouncing back, but at a higher level. So becoming better of adverse conditions.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host, Joyce Joya.
Welcome back to another Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. We on the Northeast are waiting for another storm, but we are back. Joyce, you are in Texas.
I am in Texas, hardest hit by this craziness, this weather aberration, so to speak. We have the 100-year storm here going on in Texas.
You actually have snow and you have ice and you have cold. Many people, and I know you've been out occasionally, didn't have power.
Electricity, yes. It was so difficult, yeah.
And I know
we for granted the creature comforts, Ira.
We do.
Things like heat and water.
So it's interesting. Right before we went on the air, and we're definitely going to talk to Tom about this. Right before we went on the air, there was a headline that came in. I think it was Washington Post or something, and it was about how unprepared Texas was, the grid. And we won't go into all the politics and everything about it, but the headline was that they didn't expect there to be this cold or snow. And I couldn't think back because a year ago, 12 months ago, we were facing a pandemic, and certainly cold and ice, in Texas is one thing. It's a small comparison to the pandemic, but the same story was we weren't prepared for it. It was coming. Yet, if you listen to the experts, if you watch the trends, which you do, and I know Tom does, that's what you guys do for a living. You watch the trends. It was coming. It was expected. Yeah, maybe it only happens once in 100 years, but it's 100 years, and it's going to show up. So those are two strikes. And what we're going to talk about today, especially with Tom, some of the megatrends that are happening in HR, not only in the U.S., but globally. And, when they happen, we don't want anybody to step back and go, this was totally unexpected. How could this have happened? No one would have seen it coming. And yet, one day after the other, there's things that people keep saying, we never expected this. We never saw it coming until the day it happens. And then it's like, what a surprise. And what are we going to do about fixing it? And these are big problems. And again, I think on the scale of things, certainly, I know you're going to talk a little bit later about climate change, the impact that's having. That'll be our head of the curve segment. But right now, we've got Tom Haak from the Netherlands. All the way from the Netherlands. I met Tom, just a little bit of background on this. I actually officially just met Tom yesterday, last night on a rehearsal to make sure the technology was going to work. But prior to that, he and I have been hanging out on this Thinkers 360 global influencer list, and we keep chasing each other's tail. Back to back. We keep flipping spots. I think right now is, Tom, you're one ahead of me on one of the lists, and I'm one ahead of you on another list. But it's been fun. And, one of the things that people have asked, talking about trends, I've been in a couple conversations about this, including on this show, about what are some of the things that you hope we keep going forward that we learned. And one of the things is, I think we've had time to actually nurture some relationships. I know that interpersonal relationship, that socialization is missing for a lot of people. But being online and people being home, we've had an opportunity to connect with people that formerly were so busy. And Tom was one of those people speaking around the world at conferences and meetings that I'm not sure we would have had the ability to even have this conversation as easily, or to have that, or that, again, just participating in some of the sharing of knowledge that we do on an everyday basis. Again, there's just a lot of good information out there. Met a ton of good people, and really excited about that. So anyway, Tom, welcome to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization.
Well, thanks for having me.
And I'm going to sync up my, looks like my camera decided to freeze up on another mode there. So I'm going to just go off there, and then I'm going to come back on, and we should be in good shape.
Blame it on the weather, I would say. That's
yeah. Today we actually have sun for the first time in 3 weeks. We have paving lights on the outside by coming on our stairs. They're about, I measured them. They were about 2 feet tall, and I haven't seen them until this morning. It just melted enough that you can see the tops, and we're supposed to get 12 more inches of snow tonight. So we'll lose all our lights again. But Tom, we want to talk about some of the megatrends that are out there now, and you follow these. You have an organization or a business, HR Trends Institute, I believe.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah.
You wrote an article a few weeks ago, and there's a few things that I really found interesting. Well, and again, it was at the end of the year, what you thought the megatrends for 2021 were going to be. I don't know if these were done in order, if you had a priority, but the first two really resonated with me. Number one was ethical leadership. And although there was a lot of, everybody has their top 3 trends, top 5 trends, top 10 trends that we're going to see. You were one of the only people that had that at the top. And I thought that was rather interesting. And the second was something that Joyce's know. I've mentioned it to her before, especially with my work with adaptability, the adaptability quotient, was anti-fragility. That was your number 2. So there was this bond, there was a connection there. But there's obviously some other trends, but I was fascinated that you chose ethical leadership and anti-fragility as 1 and 2. Now, was that a priority? I mean, do you
well, it's never really a priority, but it's more it's partly the trend list and partly my wish list as well. So it's a mixture.
So I have a question for you, Tom.
Yeah.
What is the difference between anti-fragility and resilience?
Yeah, that's a good. I would say, and it's not from me. It's Taleb, the great writer who wrote about that. He also wrote a fantastic book, The Black Swan, and Ira was referring to that. Basically, when do really unexpected things appear, you cannot prepare, but if they come, you better be ready. And he was saying, well, you have something like fragile, and breakable, etc. Then you could say resilient or robust. You can bounce back, but anti-fragile is kind of bouncing back, but at a higher level. So becoming better of adverse conditions. And I like that concept a lot. It's not bouncing back, and resilience is more, okay, you're resilient, you go with the flow, and you still are alive, but anti-fragility is, well, you become better. And for not only for individuals, but also for organizations, that's an interesting concept. Because let's look at the COVID-19 crisis. You saw a lot of differences. Some organizations were able to be flexible, were able to think, oh, well, things are changing.
Right, and take advantage of changing market conditions, for sure.
And then in the Netherlands, you saw a category of people saying, what is the government doing? How are they helping us? Still today.
All over the world you saw that, Tom.
We're 1 year. I just came here watching our news, and Ahold, which is one of our biggest retail chain, they made a lot of money last year because everybody still has to eat, and they also have a good delivery service. So they earned a lot of money. But of course, a lot of small shops are closed. Now they were discussing how to get the money from the big companies to the small company. I said, well,
no.
Maybe that's not the solution. But there are also small retail stores that designed their business. Say, well, maybe people are not coming to the shop anymore. We should do things differently, and that's partly, you could say, anti-fragility.
Yeah. I have seen pictures and videos of small businesses that had shops that had pivoted to start offering masks and mask frames and the things that we can wear behind the mask that hold it instead of being on our ears. And all I can do is marvel that those even small businesses recognized that there was a place for them to pivot and take advantage of.
And I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying everybody can do it.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that organizations, that's part of that trend, organizations are now looking, how can we as organizations become more anti-fragile in a way?
Right.
And that's partly back to the people. Do we have the people on board who can easily adapt, think about new things? That's, you could say, the anti-fragile personality.
And that's why Ira and I have talked so frequently about the fact that adaptability is the talent that is most in demand by companies today, so that we can have the team that we need to be anti-fragile. But here's the key that I think is really the most important. And that is that not only do we need to recruit those people who can help us be anti-fragile, but we need to engage them and ask them what they think and allow them to help us move forward into the future. Too many organizations make the mistake of hiring these wonderful people, and then they never ask them what they think. They never ask them for suggestions. And so all of this talent remains locked up in the person's being. And but the company never knows it.
That's back to I have a question for Ira is, can you measure anti-fragility? You're in the test arena. Is that something you can test? Can you test the anti-fragile personality? We don't hear you. You're on mute.
Please unmute yourself.
There I am. I said, thank you, Tom. I'll send you the check later. So, yeah, I mean, that's part of where this evolved. Working with the adaptability quotient, they identified 5 personal abilities. There's other aspects to it. It's the environment, it's the company culture, it's the experience, it's your support system that you have to get through this. But from a personal ability, there's a lot of skills that have been thrown out there. Grit is certainly one of them, with the work of Angela Duckworth, and that's the endurance. That's the ability to keep going, to persevere. There is resilience. That's bouncing back. The best analogy I have is a Weeble. You knock it down, it bounces back, and we saw a lot of that. But there was also mental flexibility. It's the ability to deal with paradox. We could measure that. Growth mindset, we were able to measure that. And then also unlearning. How willing are people to unlearn their old behaviors to learn? So there was those 5 dimensions. And yes, that's part of the AQAI that we use. And so, yes, absolutely, we can measure that. But putting this, you said something really important. I think it was the dialogue you were having with Joyce, and I can't remember, was you, Joyce, or you said this, Tom. But as companies were, the companies that were waiting to just reopen, and they were going to go back to the way it was. That's an indication of resilience. It's where we were shut down, the storm hit, the pandemic hit. We're gonna have an opening date. We're gonna bring back our help. We're going to serve the same menu, and the customers will come back just like it used to be. That's resilience if you were able to get through that point, and maybe some grit. The anti-fragility in our world, in the HR world, in the people world, is that when you reopen those doors, you've re-engineered. You may bring the same people back, or maybe you bring the best people back, or maybe you bring a different type of people back because there's different needs. Maybe there's a different menu. the customers may have different needs and expectations now following the pandemic. How do you, anti-fragility to me means how do you grow bigger and stronger as a result of everything?
What you saw a lot in 2020 was in a kind adaptation. So there was a new situation and organizations adapted. But many did not really, and I'm also looking at the internal way organizations are working, Joyce referred to that, is there was not a real transformation. Just a simple example, people found out, we cannot have our physical meetings anymore, so we have to do it online. But there you were, Monday morning, 9 o'clock, in your good morning, Joyce. It's Monday morning. Good morning, Ira. There we are in our boring Monday morning meeting. That's adaptation. And many organizations were able to do that. But the transformation is that we would say, well, do we really need those meetings? Maybe we can have a meeting 24/7. An asynchronous meeting where we share our thoughts, and then now and then we come together to do something nice. Instead of having good morning, how was your weekend? And but that transformation, I think that's 2021, big opportunities for organizations. And that's in line with what you said. And that's, are we really transforming? And that has partly to do also with the anti-fragility.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I love the fact that people adaptation without transformation is going back to normal. It's going back to the way it was, which we're not going to happen. So,
I have a great example of that. Just let me add this very quickly. There's a restaurant in Austin, which is one of my favorites. It's called the Clay Pit, and it's run by a French-trained chef whose name is Bally Singh. And Bally realized during the pandemic that his menu was way too big. And sadly, he did away with some of the things that I liked the best. But the way that he streamlined his menu really made it easier and more efficient and more profitable for his restaurant to stay in business. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing that we need to see from a lot of different organizations.
Yeah, the goal is to how can we learn from this? How can we grow bigger? How can we go stronger? And that's really anti-fragility. Now we spent, I'm sure the three of us can spend a long time going over that. But there were other things. And again, so let's go back to the number one that was on your either your wish list or your trend.
No, but that's absolutely that's both on my wish list, but we see it slowly coming. But I'm an HR professional, so I look a little bit at the world of HR. Now we have read all those terrible stories, even this year, but also last year. I'm sure she said, and but also, for example, stories about unethical practices in Uber when they developed their business. We've had practices here in the Netherlands at universities where for years professors went on and arrested students. Then if you look in those books and you read the stories, HR is often absent. They don't play a role at all, because they often are both legal is worse, because legal is trying to cover it up, but HR is then they don't show ethical leadership here. And I think these are the big stories, but there are smaller stories as well. For example, if we look at salary levels around the world and the differences between the pay for women and men, they are still, even in most countries, quite substantial for equal work. That's also, you should show leadership as companies. I said, this is unacceptable, and it's relatively easy to change. It doesn't take a lot. There are companies that are doing that. They say, we don't find this acceptable, and we do it. But when I look at some of the HR professionals that speak about it, say, but it's complicated and it's years and years history.
It seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that particularly the old style HR folks grew up in a time where their job was to just make sure that everything was running smoothly. Don't rock the boat. Don't have anything that will disrupt our calm way of doing things. Whether that was ethical or not, that's what they thought was their job. And now here we are in 2021, and we're asking them to get out of their comfort zones and to not play police people, but at least to support the examination and the making sure
inquiry,
the inquiry.
But
right,
it's not only HR, of course.
happened.
So it's not only HR, it's wider, but it's exactly as you're saying. And it's partly also because many HR, they were so keen on being part of management. Saying, we are also management and we are part of the top team. So they associated more with the top of the organization than with the people in the organization, because that was old-fashioned. But now, they should, it's not either, but you should play a role in saying this is the practices in our organization, the practice in society. And there are many practices where organizations can do something. So also organizations, and there are signs. So there are signs that people are expecting more of organizations to take a point of view, not to say, oh, there's things happening. No. There are things happening, and we as organizations can influence them. And well, you have many companies in the US that can play that role, and I see signals that they are taking up that responsibility. So that's positive, I think.
Yeah,
I think so. And by the way, Tom, my attitude is that we manage things and we lead people. And I believe that too often those two things are very confused. And that's why we have HR managers, not HR leaders. I prefer to support my HR professional friends to be leaders as opposed to managers.
But the ethical leadership is a difficult subject. It can quickly become controversial. It's about small things and big things, but we expect, and that's also the expectation of people, that organizations don't take things for granted, and that they are, in a sense, and that's the whole long-term mega trend, the growing importance of purpose. People are not just working for the money, they want to help to change the world with their organizations, in their organization. And that's, I think, a very positive thing.
Yeah, Tom, for so long, I mean, you basically inferred this, that HR was looking to get that seat at the table, and then they got the seat at the table, but they lost their voice. They just sat there. And it's more important to have their voice. I don't know how many conversations I've been in. We've had a couple, quite a few podcasts and interviews with people talking about diversity and inclusion and equity. So it's not just the pay equity; it's also racial inequities, social inequities, and there's a whole. But at least the conversation seems to have taken a feverish pitch, and maybe because finally, at least in the circles we're hanging with. So we may be in our bubble. But the other part is, and I know this is another passion of yours, is the people analytics. And maybe it's because finally people have figured out a way to measure some of these inequities. And I know in the US now, it's going to be part of the SEC filings for public companies, that they're going to require to understand what if you value your people, if you say you do, put numbers to it.
But it's interesting, and it's back to the start of our conversation. Some of the mega trends are long-term trends that are there for years. Some of those trends are neglected in a way. So, for example, using data and scientific knowledge in the workplace, well, that's nothing new. But it's partly not done. I'll give you a super simplistic example, referring to the biases. We know that the interview as a selection method is not very good. and it
coin.
creates all kinds of biases. Eh? Right. But look around you in the most organizations. Well, the most important selection instrument is the unstructured interview. Still, there are still many organizations that don't use tests, that use interviews, and the bias is enormous. And companies, back to the analytics that measured that, I've seen research, for example, that showed that when a male recruiter is interviewing a man or is interviewing a woman, the male interviews last 15 minutes longer on average in that organization than male-female, because male, well, you know, we feel a little bit more comfortable. We talk about football or whatever your passion is, cars, the usual man thing. And in those 15 minutes, well, you know, the bias is already there.
Right. Well, I'll even go earlier than that process, even before the interview. And I bring this up all the time. And I've got, anybody's interested, just go to the YouTube channel or my videos, is the application. The application, everybody says we are very conscious. We're EEO compliant. We're doing our best to eliminate bias. And the first thing that an applicant, a candidate, is asked to supply is a first name and a last name.
Yeah.
Which immediately introduces bias. And
next even worse is a photo. Huh?
Right. Well, at least in the U.S., we're not supposed to use photos.
And gender. Don't forget gender.
But
so how many organizations are blind interviewing? I don't know many.
Well, even with the blind interview, if the first pieces of information you use, it's the paper form.
Yeah.
First name, last name, address, where you live.
It's also in the Netherlands. If you're called Mohammed, your chances on the job diminish immediately.
Absolutely. Which even then means people say, well, we don't collect names, we just collect emails. Well, the emails expose that, too.
Yeah.
So,
if you still have a Hotmail address, then you better not.
So there's ways to anonymize that. But at least we're having this conversation. No one prior to this was even talking about how do you reform that, how you reform the interview.
Yeah.
So we've covered, we've barely covered, so we scratched the surface on ethical leadership, anti-fragility. You had a list of 11. What's one other one, just on their time restraints that
Well, I think a totally different one, and I like that a lot, is learning in the flow of work. And that's around, because there we see a lot of traditional, that's back also to transformation. The adapting is no longer a classroom physically, but an online, boring teacher who's giving you a lecture. Learning in the flow of work is how can we get really close to the work people are doing, and then a system to do that work better. And technology can help a lot there. For a conversation like this can be monitored by technology, and I'm not doing that at this moment, but then it can start giving me suggestions on what to do better. And maybe change my tone of voice, maybe look a little bit better in the camera, maybe you haven't asked Joyce any question. Hey, Joyce. So that's learning in the flow of work, and that's an enormous if you let your fantasy go, that gives enormous opportunities.
Well, some of these are just like duh movements. You think about when we need to do something, when we need to learn something, we're not sure how to do it. First thing we do is we Google it, or we go up to YouTube and learn how to use it. When it came to work, it said, no, that won't work there. We need to bring in a trainer. We need to put it in the budget. We need to think about it. Where workmen, I mean, even there was an HVAC, we had somebody doing our maintenance and they weren't sure how to do something. Here's two examples of how this could be applied. One is he looked it up, and I said, and I was listening. He basically looked it up on YouTube as an example. The second is when he was fixing it, he was recording it. And they were collecting it. They said, if you're out there and see something that's unusual, record it and send it to us, and we'll have it in our library for the next time.
I love that. That's great.
It's brilliant, and it's easy.
In our book, I wrote a book years ago with my late partner now, Roger Herman, and it was called How to Become an Employer of Choice. And one of the things I suggested in the growth and opportunity section was make everyone a teacher. And that was the 20 years ago version of having us all learn from each other in process, because it is in doing the work. And when I was working with interns, I would be asked a question and I would turn it back to the interns and say, okay, who among you knows the answer to that question? And one of them would invariably know the answer to that question. And so I would let them teach each other the answer. However, there's a way to do that even if you don't have interns in your organization.
For sure.
And it's back to your point. How do you use the capabilities of people? And
exactly.
and it's often organizations more take, you have to learn things. Huh? Yeah. What can we learn you instead of what can we learn from you?
Right.
That's a different perspective. Absolutely.
So Tom, the three of us could go on forever. I can talk to you. There's obviously a lot, even though we've only met less than 24 hours ago for the first time, and we keep crossing paths. A lot of synergy. So hopefully you and I will have a continued conversation after this. How can people get a hold of you? How can they learn more about HR?
If they Google Tom Haak, you'll find different entries. So on LinkedIn, our website. I'm quite transparent and visible on YouTube as well. So there's numerous ways you can.
That's why you're chasing my tail on Thinkers 360, right? So it's HR Trends Institute. Is it
HRTrendInstitute.com? HRTrendInstitute.com. That's the website.
It's an excellent resource. Yep. Yeah, wonderful. Tom, I really appreciate it. Please stay safe.
Nice to meet you.
Hopefully, we'll get to actually travel again and meet physically one another.
So.
Yeah, that would be great.
Hey,
have a nice show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Wow, super nice guy. I've as I said earlier, I've met so many really, really good people because I think people were at home. So you had those opportunities to develop some relationships where in the past, everybody was in passing and it was more difficult. So there are some good things that are coming out of the pandemic. We are going to take a short break and talk about another trend that's coming on ahead of the curve, or a trend that's here. We're going to hear from our two sponsors. One is Ngomo. Again, we really thank them for being part of being our sponsor, for helping us get the message out. And they also have a wonderful message. And I think it's in 2 weeks. We're going to have Al Wynot he's going to be here. We're going to talk to him.
He'll be our guest.
Yeah, we're going to talk to him a little bit more about what's going on. And then, of course, Success Performance Solutions. So we will stay tuned. We will be right back, minute and a half or so. And we're going to be talking about climate change.
Imagine growing great employees and advancing emerging leaders with one small monthly investment. With the Ngomu app, you can support your employees in career and personal development and health and wellness without spending a lot of effort to schedule and hold numerous training sessions. With the efficient app, your employees will have access to dozens of coaches in groups and one-on-ones for whatever topic they need or want to work on anytime, anywhere. Picture the positive impact on your team by having access to over 80 coaches. Learn more at ngomu.com today.
And we are back. Welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. And didn't do this at the beginning of the show, but please, if you're not part of Googlization Nation, you can be part of our community. You go to googlizationnation.com and it's free. You'll get updates about the podcast, the interviews, our show notes, and other events. And on March 24th, I believe it's 11 a.m., you can go up to the website or you'll get notices if you go to googlizationnation.com. We're having a panel on adaptability, something we were just talking about. And we're going to have Ross Thornley. There's 4 panelists. I'm still lining up a couple of the other ones. But we're going to have Ross Thornley. He's one of the founders of AQAI. we're going to also have Heidi Spierge. Heidi is the Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer of Cornerstone On Demand. And one of their focuses, Cornerstone's On Demand's focus this year, is on adaptability. They have a couple different themes that they're working on, but that is one of them as well. And there's going to be a couple other guests. So please, stay tuned for this. I'll announce the link, but you can also go up to the website and learn more about it, or connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'll be happy to send it. Registration's free, and there will also be one SHRM credit if you attend. So let's go to talk about the other trend that's happening. You're experiencing it for real.
Whoa, as I look out my window, Ira, at the
not even
ice.
in Chicago, Joyce.
I know. I'm not even above the Mason-Dixon line. And here I am with ice sheets on the streets and ice covering every piece of vegetation that I see when I look outside of my window. It's really sad.
Yep.
And the question is, why is this happening? Well, it's happening because as the planet raises in temperature, and we used to call it global warming, but the reason that we now call it climate change is that some areas get warmer while other areas get colder. And so we've got this balancing act that the planet is trying to do to equalize temperatures, and we end up with snowstorms, ice storms, hurricanes. And the science is that as the areas warm up, and the Arctic is definitely warming up, as is the Antarctic, more moisture is absorbed into the air. And then that moisture makes its way in what we used to call a polar finger, which is like a U-shaped force that's coming down from the Arctic, and then the jet stream carries it across the country, and that's how we end up with this crazy winter weather. In the hurricane season, it's a little bit easier to understand because the warming oceans mean that the more moisture is being sucked into the clouds. Those clouds then, because of the Coriolanus effect, which is an effect a scientific effect that's been observed that has to do with the direction that wind revolves in, where depending on where you are in terms of latitude on the planet, and it spins that air, which is now filled with moisture, and we end up with bigger and bigger storms. And that's how we get these storms.
Yeah, and I think and again, when you say bigger, and again, it's unusual, so people can say, well, it's a 100-year event, and this is the first. It's 100 years. It means it's happened before. So people sort of write that off. What's happening is these 100-year events are now not taking 100 years. They're happening more frequently. For years, like with hurricanes, they went through the alphabet. They'd have 26 names. And they'd go through the alphabet, right. And they'd sometimes get to 18, or they'd have leftovers. And then last year, they almost went through twice. There were so many hurricanes. Now, part of it's science that they're able to identify these before that they actually happened, but they're happening. But these events, these weather events, are happening more intensely and more frequently. And yes. That's really important for people to understand, because it's, again, saying, well, Texas has seen snow, Texas has seen ice. We've had these multiple storms before. The Northeast isn't so unusual. It's more going back to the way I remember growing up as a child, that we've had snowstorm after snowstorm, and and again, it's cold, but we haven't broken any records this year. But there's other parts that have, and we also tend to live in our own bubble,
For
and we
sure.
don't just think it's unusual weather events, that climate change. It's probably a terrible name. That there's so many more effects of that.
Right. And one of them has to do with infections, because when the weather changes in areas, the animals that lived in a particular area may need to move to another area to stay more comfortable. And when they move into that other area, they come face to face with animals that they had never before.
Well,
and that's where we get that spillover.
Well, when you talk about never before, it is because the ice caps are melting. There are bacteria and viruses that are trapped under the ice literally millions of years ago.
Right.
And so you can say, well, you talk about it hasn't happened in a million years. Okay, well, now it's happening again because it happened once and people might have died for it. There may have been a pandemic a million years ago, or it was a common disease, but now we have millions of people on the planet, not just a handful. We have mobility. So what maybe was isolated in the Arctic or in Antarctica is now going to be spread much more readily. So we're introducing new variants on a daily basis anymore, even with COVID. The animals are moving different places. We have more human mobility. We haven't had it like we did prior to that, but people are still moving around and socializing. And then we have millennial old
viruses and other infections that are just kind of showing up because
and this isn't
we've unearthed them.
Yeah, we're again, I don't want people to think that, because frankly I'm the millennial trapped in the baby boomer body, I'm still thinking that there's a lot more to go. I'm optimistic in the sense that there is hope, there is opportunity, and all we have to do is recognize that these things are happening. And then we have our abilities, we have our collective manpower, we have our collective knowledge, we have our technology to help solve some of these problems. But we can keep ignoring them.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And the fact is that change is coming at us at an ever increasing rate. And that's why it's so important for people to stay ahead of the curve.
VUCA.
And one of the things that I'm going to share is that they can sign up for the Herman Trend Alert at www.hermantrendalerts.com. Yep. Now, this ahead of the curve segment, which is usually kind of a rehash of a previous Herman Trend Alert, I said, this is what we're going to talk about today because this is what I thought was important for people to know.
It's happening today. No, absolutely. And again, I want people to think about it. Again, we primarily focus on HR, the business of people, with that, of how is this going to impact businesses? How is this going to impact people? Where people live, how they work, how things get done.
And what do we need to do to plan ahead now so that when we get there and those changes do come, that we won't get blindsided.
And as I started the show, we said, people said, oh, don't worry about the pandemic. We have a couple of years to plan for it. And then you're caught off guard. Texas is caught off guard with the grid. Things of, hey, we don't, what's the chances of getting snow and ice and cold for an extended period of time? And then it happens. And that just happens more frequently. It's VUCA. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I put out a tweet, but I did it on LinkedIn the other day. And I said, the new uncertainty is the new normal. And we need
very
we
appropriate.
need to
Yes.
become comfortable with that. We are almost out of time again. We want to thank, again, all our listeners. We want to especially thank our guests. And today our guest was Tom Haak from HR Trend Institute. Please look him up either under Tom Haak. It's Haak. Super, super nice guy. He's got some great thoughts, great ideas, very practical. And hopefully you'll share the show as we talked about ethical leadership and anti-fragility. You'll be hearing a lot more about that.
And to sign up for our podcast, go to googlizationnation.com.
Right. Absolutely. And if you are already a listener, please leave please rate the show. If you're listening,
leave us a comment.
Yeah. If you're on YouTube, please leave some comments, what you liked and didn't like. If you're listening on Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeart, SoundCloud, Audible, please rate the show, share it, let people know that we're around. We want to thank Ngomo again for being our sponsor, talking about personal and career development. We're really excited. 2 weeks, March 3rd, we're going to have Al Wynot. He's the founder of Ngomo, and we'll learn a lot more about it at that point. But you can go up, you can see it scrolling across the screen. Well, the big launch, I don't think it happened yet, but the big launch is coming any day now.
Oh, March, in the beginning of March, I believe.
Yeah, to coincide with that. So again, you'll get a precursor of what's.
And by the way, Ngomu is now up to 92 coaches.
Oh, wow. That's fabulous.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I thank everybody again for being here. You've been listening to Geeks Geezers Googlization. And until next time, don't let the shift get your plans.